The entire village tried to shut down his fish farm, calling it a disaster waiting to happen. But just 1 year later, after an unbelievable discovery transformed the land, the very people who wanted it closed were fighting to buy it, and what changed their minds left everyone speechless. Before we jump into today's incredible story, make sure you're part of our YouTube family by clicking the subscribe button. If you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now sit back and get comfortable, because this is the story of a man whose entire village tried to shut down his fish farm only to come back 1 year later, begging to buy it. Let's get into the story. Jacob Turner stood quietly at the edge of the largest pond as the first rays of morning sunlight spread across the calm water. Mist drifted gently over the surface, hiding the broken wooden docks and rusted feeding machines that had not worked in years. Wild reeds covered the shoreline, frogs croaked from every direction, and abandoned nets hung from leaning fence posts like forgotten memories. Most people saw an abandoned fish farm. Jacob saw the beginning of a new life. He had spent nearly 12 years working on commercial fishing boats along the northern coast. Long days at sea had taught him patience, discipline, and respect for nature. He learned that the healthiest waters always rewarded those who cared for them, instead of trying to control them. When his father passed away unexpectedly, Jacob returned to his hometown of Pine Hollow. The village looked almost exactly as he remembered. The same small grocery store stood beside the old church. Children still rode bicycles through quiet streets. Farmers gathered every morning at the cafe to discuss crops and weather. Only one place had changed. The Turner Fish Farm, once one of the village's busiest businesses, it now looked forgotten. Years earlier, disease had wiped out most of the fish stocks. Rising costs forced Jacob's father to close the operation, and after his death, no one believed it could ever succeed again. Several buyers wanted the land. One planned to build warehouses. Another wanted to drain the ponds completely. Jacob refused every offer. Instead, he invested every dollar he had saved from years at sea. His friends thought he was making a terrible mistake. "You've got enough money to start fresh somewhere else. Why stay here? The fish farm is finished." Jacob simply smiled. "My father never gave up on this place. Neither will I." 3 weeks later, he officially became the owner. His first days were exhausting. Before sunrise each morning, he repaired broken fences. He removed fallen trees blocking water channels. He rebuilt damaged pond walls using stones gathered from nearby fields. At night, he studied books on sustainable aquaculture, water filtration, and wetland restoration. His goal wasn't simply to raise fish. He wanted to rebuild the entire ecosystem. Instead of using chemical treatments, he planted native reeds that naturally filtered water. He restored small wetlands between the ponds. He installed solar-powered pumps instead of old diesel engines. Neighbors watched with curiosity. Some admired his determination. Others laughed. Old Frank Wilson leaned against the village store one afternoon and shook his head. "City ideas. They'll never work here." Another farmer laughed. "Fish don't pay bills." Jacob overheard every word. He never argued. His father once told him, "The loudest answer isn't spoken. It's built." Weeks passed. The ponds slowly became clearer. Wild ducks returned. Dragonflies hovered above the reeds. Even the frogs seemed louder. Jacob smiled every time he noticed another sign of life returning. But not everyone appreciated the changes. One evening, a notice appeared on the village bulletin board. "Public community meeting. Discussion regarding the Turner Fish Farm." Jacob attended. Nearly the entire village had gathered inside the old community hall. Council Chairwoman Evelyn Brooks stood at the front. "We've received several complaints." She looked toward Jacob. "Residents are concerned your project may threaten nearby farmland." Another council member added, "Some believe the ponds could contaminate local streams." A farmer stood up. "My cattle drink downstream. I don't want fish waste entering the creek." Someone else shouted, "What about mosquitoes?" Another voice followed. "The smell alone will lower property values." Murmurs filled the room. Jacob quietly listened. When Chairwoman Brooks invited him to speak, he slowly walked to the front. He didn't carry charts. He didn't bring lawyers. Only a small glass jar. Inside was crystal clear pond water. He placed it on the table. "This came from the largest pond this morning." The audience looked surprised. Jacob smiled. "I understand your concerns. If I lived downstream, I'd ask questions too." He pointed toward the jar. "My farm doesn't discharge dirty water. It filters water." Several people exchanged skeptical looks. Jacob continued, "I've planted native wetlands. They remove excess nutrients naturally. I'm rebuilding the ponds slowly because healthy fish require healthy water." One man interrupted. "Sounds expensive." "It is." Another laughed. "So when it fails, who cleans up the mess?" The room filled with quiet laughter. Jacob remained calm. "If it fails, I'll clean it myself. But if it succeeds, our village gains something worth protecting." The meeting ended without a decision. Instead, the council delayed several permits needed to expand the farm. Construction inspections, water licenses, equipment approvals, everything slowed. Some believed the delays would eventually force Jacob to quit. He didn't. Each morning he continued working. Each evening he continued learning. Months passed. Spring became summer. The ponds transformed. Clear water reflected blue skies. Water lilies bloomed. Herons returned to hunt along the shoreline. Children riding bicycles often stopped outside the fence simply to watch the fish swimming beneath the surface. One afternoon, Jacob noticed a young boy standing quietly beside the entrance. The child looked nervous. "You like fish?" The boy nodded. "My grandpa says this place used to be beautiful." Jacob smiled. "It will be again." He handed the boy a small bucket. "Want to help feed them?" The boy's face lit up. Within minutes, several other children joined. Soon, laughter echoed across the ponds for the first time in years. Parents watched from a distance. Some smiled. Others still remained uncertain. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, Jacob walked beside the largest pond carrying a flashlight. Something caught his attention. The water near the northern bank moved strangely. Not waves, not wind. A steady current. He knelt beside the shoreline. Tiny bubbles rose continuously from beneath the water. Freshwater bubbles. Natural spring activity. His heartbeat quickened. The old maps mentioned underground springs, but no one believed they still flowed. He marked the location with a wooden stake. The following morning he returned before sunrise. The current seemed even stronger. As sunlight reached the water, thousands of tiny silver fish suddenly appeared, swimming through the bubbling spring into the pond. Jacob stared in disbelief. These weren't hatchery fish. They were wild, healthy, strong. He watched silently as more and more fish emerged from beneath the pond floor. Somehow, a hidden underground spring had reopened, and it wasn't just carrying water. It was bringing life back to the farm. Just as Jacob reached for his phone to record the unbelievable sight, a white government vehicle pulled into the driveway. A woman wearing an environmental research jacket stepped out carrying a large metal case. She looked directly at Jacob and smiled. "I've been testing the water around your farm for the last 6 months." She held up a thick report. "And I think you're about to surprise this entire village." Jacob set down the bucket of fish feed as the woman walked toward him. She extended her hand with a warm smile. "My name is Dr. Emily Carter. I'm an environmental scientist with the Regional Freshwater Research Institute." Jacob shook her hand. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Emily smiled. "You weren't supposed to. I've been collecting water samples from the streams around Pine Hollow for months." Jacob looked surprised. "Without telling anyone?" She nodded. "We were studying declining water quality across the region. Your property became part of the research." She opened the metal case and removed several neatly organized reports. "I think you'll want to see these." They sat together on the wooden dock overlooking the largest pond. Emily spread colorful charts across the table. "I tested water entering your property." She pointed to the first graph. "Then I tested water leaving it." Jacob leaned closer. The numbers looked impressive. "What do they mean?" Emily smiled. "It means your fish farm isn't polluting the stream." She paused. "It's cleaning it." Jacob looked up. "Cleaning it?" Emily nodded. "The wetlands you restored are naturally filtering harmful nutrients before the water flows downstream." She turned another page. "Nitrate levels have dropped by nearly 60%. Water clarity has doubled. Oxygen levels are the highest we've recorded anywhere in the county." Jacob stared silently at the report. He hadn't restored the wetlands to prove anyone wrong. He simply believed nature worked best when given the chance. Emily continued. "There's more." She pulled out several photographs. The images showed rare birds nesting beside the ponds, native turtles basking on fallen logs, endangered aquatic plants growing near the shoreline. "We haven't seen some of these species here in decades." Jacob smiled quietly. "They came back on their own." Emily nodded. "Exactly." Word spread quickly. Within days, local newspapers published photographs of the restored ponds. The headline surprised everyone. "Bundapunid Fish Farm becomes environmental success story." Television reporters arrived. School teachers asked permission to bring students. University researchers requested access to study the wetlands. Children who once rode past on bicycles now visited with notebooks and cameras. The fish farm slowly became something much bigger than a business. It became a classroom. One Saturday morning, Jacob noticed familiar faces approaching the entrance. The same farmers, who had criticized him months earlier, stood awkwardly near the gate. Frank Wilson removed his cap. "I guess, we judged you too soon." Jacob smiled. "We all make mistakes." Frank looked across the clear water. "I've never seen the creek this clean. My cattle are healthier this year." "I thought it was the extra rain." Jacob simply nodded. The wetlands help more than people realize. Little by little, opinions changed. The village council finally approved every delayed permit. Local volunteers even offered to help repair old walking trails around the ponds. For the first time since returning home, Jacob felt accepted. But success attracted attention beyond Pine Hollow. One afternoon, 3 expensive black SUVs parked outside the fish farm. Several well-dressed executives stepped out. Their leader introduced himself, Daniel Mercer, vice president of Blue Wave Seafood. Jacob had heard of the company. It owned dozens of commercial fish farms across the country. Daniel smiled confidently. "You've built something remarkable. We'd like to buy it." Jacob remained polite. "I'm not interested." Daniel handed him a folder. "Perhaps you should see our offer first." Inside was a number so large Jacob read it twice. It was more money than he had imagined earning in his lifetime. Daniel watched carefully. "You could retire tomorrow. No more financial worries, no more hard labor. We'll continue operating the farm." Jacob slowly closed the folder. "My answer is still no." Daniel looked surprised. "May I ask why?" Jacob glanced across the ponds. Children were feeding fish from the dock. A great blue heron landed quietly near the reeds. The restored wetlands shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. "This place isn't just a business. It's home." The executives left respectfully. But the story didn't end there. Only 2 weeks later, Chairwoman Evelyn Brooks requested another emergency village meeting. The community hall filled once again. This time, nobody laughed when Jacob entered. Evelyn cleared her throat. "First, I'd like to apologize." She looked directly at Jacob. "The council should have trusted your vision." Jacob nodded politely. "Thank you." She continued, "However, the village now faces another decision." Several council members exchanged nervous looks. Evelyn unfolded an official document. "Because of its environmental importance, the council proposes purchasing your fish farm." Murmurs spread through the room. Jacob frowned slightly. "For what purpose?" "We'd like to convert the entire property into a public conservation park." Another council member added, "It belongs to everyone now." Someone from the audience stood. "But what happens to Jacob?" Silence. Evelyn answered carefully, "We would compensate him fairly." Jacob slowly stood. "So after trying to shut my farm down, now you want to own it?" No one answered. The room became uncomfortably quiet. Then another voice came from the back. Daniel Mercer, the seafood executive. He had quietly entered the meeting unnoticed. He smiled confidently. "If the village doesn't buy it, my company still will." Jacob suddenly realized he wasn't fighting doubt anymore. He was standing between 2 powerful groups, both determined to take the farm he had sacrificed everything to rebuild. The restored wetlands. Observation decks overlooked the largest ponds. A small visitor center displayed information about sustainable fish farming, wildlife conservation, and water restoration. Children from nearby schools arrived every week. They learned how healthy wetlands naturally filtered water. They watched fish being raised responsibly. They planted native flowers beside the ponds. Parents soon joined them. Families volunteered on weekends. Local restaurants proudly served fish raised at the farm. The village cafe added Turner Fish Farm fresh catch to its menu. Tourists began arriving from neighboring counties. Bed and breakfasts opened. Small gift shops appeared. The local bakery doubled its production to meet growing demand. Businesses that had struggled for years suddenly flourished. Exactly 1 year after the council had tried to shut the farm down, another community meeting was held. This time, the room was filled with celebration instead of criticism. The mayor stepped onto the stage holding a framed certificate. "Today, Pine Hollow has officially been recognized as one of the state's leading examples of environmental restoration working alongside sustainable agriculture." The audience cheered, and the mayor smiled toward Jacob. "And there's one more announcement." He revealed a new sign. Turner Community Fish Farm and Nature Reserve. The crowd rose to its feet. Jacob looked almost embarrassed. "This wasn't just me." He pointed toward the audience. "It belongs to every volunteer, every student, every neighbor who believed we could become better." Frank Wilson laughed. "And even the stubborn ones who believed too late." Everyone smiled. Late that evening, after the celebrations ended, Jacob walked alone along the largest pond. The water reflected thousands of stars. Frogs sang from the reeds. A family of ducks drifted peacefully across the surface. He remembered standing in the same place exactly 1 year earlier. Broken docks, murky water, empty buildings, people telling him to give up. Now laughter echoed from nearby picnic tables. Children chased fireflies beside the walking trail. The restored farm had become the heart of Pine Hollow. Jacob sat quietly on the end of the wooden dock. His father's old pocket knife rested in his hand. He smiled as he remembered the words that had guided him through every difficult day. Never waste time trying to prove people wrong. Spend that time proving what's possible. Looking across the peaceful ponds, Jacob finally understood what his father had meant. Success had never come from defeating the people who doubted him. It came from inviting them to become part of something greater than themselves. The village hadn't simply changed its opinion. It had changed its future. And the fish farm everyone once wanted to shut down had become the very place that brought an entire community together proving that the strongest foundations are built not on winning arguments, but on earning trust one quiet act at a time.